All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of Question Period. Today's April 16th, 2024, and I'm making sure my microphone is on at the start of my live stream. Instead of doing that for a couple of minutes and relying on the chat for telling me that my mic is muted. Thanks, everybody, for doing that. Before we get into it, I want to encourage everyone who hasn't yet already to smash the like on the live stream and check to see if you are subscribed. You could be very well a frequent flyer of this channel without actually being subscribed, but that's just what the algorithm feeds you. So if you take time right now, check to see if you're subscribed. Turn on post notifications before we begin. That way it ensures not only do you get updates on upcoming videos, but more importantly, these live streams. It's going to be a great question period. Big day in Canada. Big day in Canada. There's a budget announcement right after this question period. And I've actually prepared a live stream on one of my other channels. So I'm going to put the link down in the description. Mr. Sunshine Clips, I've converted that into Mr. Sunshine Live. So if you want to go and check out that channel, I'm actually going to take the link for that. And I'm going to go live right after this live stream, right after question period. I'm going to go live on Mr. Sunshine Live, and that's where the budget announcement will actually take place. So, yeah, just a fun little fact. And, yeah, I hope everyone's having a good start to their day. I want to encourage everyone to get situated with their coffee. I've got mine right here. Get your water, get your beer, get whatever you need to, because you're not going to want to miss this question period. I think we're all set. Mic is on. Without further ado, let's get into statements by members. It's about 5-10 minutes before question period begins. So here we go, folks.
And this is how we can guarantee our food security. Members of the Senate, we are asking you to vote in.
It is going to be a long day.
The future.
Long, fun day. Holy
smokes.
smokes.
Thank you.
L'honorable député d'Orléans.
Monsieur le Président, ce fut un privilège.
Mr. Speaker, it was a privilege to welcome French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal to Canada last week. This was his first foreign visit outside of the European Union. In my capacity as president of the Canada-France Interparliamentary Association, I also met my French counterparts, Christopher Weisberg, president of the France-Canada Interparliamentary Association, and Senator Yann Chantel.
Oh, here we go.
President of the France-Canada. History and France remain strong partners who share many priorities, such as
China's hacking,
the Francophonie, innovation, and countless other priorities. I would like to thank the entire French delegation for this wonderful.
How bad is the budget going to be? Bad?
Kelowna.
Just picture bad, whatever that would be, and then make it worse, and then burn it, because that's where it's going to be.
Passed away on March 23rd, 2024, at 91 years old. And
the worst in the last 40 years, that's right. You got
retired as an
previous Bank of Canada governors and things like that have come out and said this is going to be the worst that Canada's almost ever seen.
His nieces, nephews, and many other relatives in Canada and Sweden. Shell gave back in many ways, supporting local fundraisers and helping people who needed a hand, like driving friends to appointments. Shell had a great memory, was a wonderful storyteller, and loved politics. He would start a conversation by saying, "I put out signs for Diefenbaker." Shell was the head sign guy on campaigns for all levels of government locally. His wooden sign design has been duplicated all over Western Canada. In politics, he was always the first to volunteer, mentor others, and was a serious campaigner. My family, Larry, Daniel, and I send our deepest condolences to the Sundin family. We love you, and we'll miss you, Shell.
The honourable member from Davenport.
This week is National Tourism Week, when we celebrate a pillar of the Canadian economy that employs nearly 1 in every 10 Canadians. In my constituency of Davenport, we attract many tourists to places such as the Museum of Contemporary Art Toronto, the Drake, the many amazing art galleries, as well as countless cafes and foodie restaurants on Dundas West, West Queen West, and Ossington Street. In addition, across Canada, business events represent 40,000 of all tourism and over 25 billion in direct GDP. That's why our federal government has invested $50 million in the International Convention Attraction Fund through Destination Canada. poised to inject another $170 million into our economy. This demonstrates our federal government's commitment to economic growth, job creation, and it positions Canada as a global hub for business excellence and innovation. Tourism truly brings people together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Labrador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. April marks Cancer Awareness Month and an important time to spotlight the impact of cancer, recognize advancements in treatment, and extend support to those affected. Last week, I had the privilege of meeting with the Cancer Society and listening to the inspiring stories of brave individuals battling this disease. It's crucial to acknowledge the deep disparities in cancer risk, care, and costs that can significantly affect treatment outcomes and overall experiences. The Canadian Cancer Society is tirelessly working to bridge these gaps, striving to improve healthcare outcomes for the 2 in 5 Canadians who will receive a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. On a personal note, as a 2-time breast cancer survivor, first diagnosed at age 42, I cannot stress enough the importance of opening regular mammography testing for women aged 40 and above. It should be available to all Canadians. It's a
She seems like a relatively new MP.
own or those you love. So let's all unite in the fight against
At least in the House.
raise awareness and advocate for better health.
Haven't really seen her much except for recently.
From Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Yesterday, the Procurement Ombuds published his damning report of this government's cozy relationship with McKinsey. McKinsey was led by Dominic Barton, a close advisor and personal friend of the Prime Minister. Barton and McKinsey were responsible for turbocharging opioid sales, fueling the opioid crisis we face today. The Ombuds found that the Liberal government changed the requirements for contracts to allow McKinsey to qualify. In one instance, they even disqualified the winning bid to ensure McKinsey got the contract. Then they switched to sole source contracts, giving McKinsey 10.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Trudeau doesn't want us watching the stream. There we go.
Barton and McKinsey were responsible for turbocharging opioid sales, fueling the opioid crisis we face today. The Ombuds found that the Liberal government changed the requirements for contracts to allow McKinsey to...
Do you know that they changed the name of the Ombudsman to Ombudspersons?
...bid to ensure McKinsey got the contract. Then they switched to sole source contracts, giving McKinsey...
Like a real thing.
...millions of dollars without any justification.
They changed it from Ombudsman to Ombudsperson.
Personally approved one of these sole source contracts for $5.7 million. No wonder the NDP Liberal coalition blocked Conservatives from getting the unredacted documents they asked for. This cover-up must end. Conservatives deserve answers.
Yeah.
That's right. The honourable member from Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, a year after we landed in Canada, my father was still looking for work. He hopped on a bus from Scarborough to Windsor for a job interview at a manufacturing plant. The interview went late. He missed the bus back to Toronto. It was dark and he was hungry. He didn't know anyone in Windsor. So he looked up the address of the Ursuline Sisters near Holy Trinity Catholic Parish and walked the 5 kilometers. Sister Małgorzata Górska opened the door, invited my dad into the warmth, and brought out supper. Sister Małgorzata knows the story of immigrants, having arrived in Canada in 1965 to open the first Ursuline convent in North America. It is the way of the Ursulines to live in service and kindness. I want to take this opportunity to wish Sister Małgorzata a happy 104th birthday and to say thank you for helping my dad that night, for getting him on a bus back to Scarborough. The next day, the phone rang and he got the job. And
let's try and get to 250 likes, folks. Still need just about 100 likes.
The honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, there are 2 sureties with this tax and spend Liberal government: high taxes and high spending, the result of which has been high inflation and high interest rates, which means Canadians are facing an affordability crisis with high food and costs of homes that are out of control. But it's much worse than that, much worse. After this budget, Canadians are going to see higher taxes, higher prices, and higher debt, with a carbon tax hurting our farmers and our citizens, with the worst housing crisis in a generation with 10 cities across this whole country, and spending that is out of control on programs that are actually worse. Margaret Thatcher said it best when she said the problem with this sort of government is you eventually run out of other people's money. Mr. Speaker, it's easy to fix, so easy even a toddler can get it because it's easy as ABC. Axe the tax, build the homes, and cap the spending. So let's get the grown-ups in government and let's bring it home.
The honourable member from Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Mr. Speaker, knocking on doors throughout the Hamilton area over the past 2 weekends, the message from Canadians is very clear. Life is unaffordable, mortgage payments and rents are through the roof, and an entire generation has given up on home ownership. Today is the day that this NDP Liberal government can actually listen to Canadians and help alleviate their very real worries. That's why, in today's budget, Common Sense Conservatives are calling on this NDP Liberal government to help Canadians survive. Stop doubling the housing costs. Stop taxing our farmers and food. Stop the inflationary deficits that are driving up interest rates. Stop endangering our social programs and jobs with more and more debt. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So today, will he please just stop?
The Honourable Member for Vimy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Members, as we launch National Tourism Week, let's reflect on the tremendous economic value that tourism brings to Canada. The tourism sector accounts for 1 in every 10 jobs in Canada. 4 in every 10 jobs in tourism are in rural areas. Also, Canada's tourism sector supports 623,000 jobs and 232,000 businesses.
The best is yet to come. Just this year, we launched the Ministerial Tourism Council, announced the International Convention Attraction Fund, estimated to attract $170 million to Canada's economy, and unveiled the Indigenous Tourism Fund, the largest investment in Indigenous tourism in the country's history. Célébrons le potentiel.
Let's celebrate the potential and resilience of Canada's tourism businesses,
especially as they continue to rise to new heights.
We still have a tourism industry?
The honourable member from Vancouver East.
As of March 23, 2024, the Safeguarding National Security Bill in Hong Kong has passed, escalating arbitrary arrests, detentions, and imprisonment for Hong Kongers who protested the implementation of the national security law in 2020. The Liberals say they stand with Hong Kong, yet IRCC's processing time for the Hong Kong Lifeboat scheme went from 6 months to 21. Hong Kong Link reports that over 8,000 applications are stuck, and while people wait, their work permit and study permits are expiring. They have lost jobs, healthcare coverage, and access to education for their children. Priority processing of these applications need to continue. To help cut the red tape and expedite processing, I'm calling on the government to automatically renew temporary permits of PR applicants from Hong Kong and to eliminate duplication for criminal record checks. Canada must prevent human rights defenders and pro-democracy activists seeking safety from being forced to return to Hong Kong.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. 100 days. Some 500 employees at military bases across Canada have been on strike for almost 100 days. These are men and women who, on a daily basis, support and accompany members of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. These workers have been on strike for almost 100 days, but they're not asking for so much. These workers, who are paid up to 60% less than their civil service counterparts, are simply calling for an old order in council that relegates them to the role of second-class workers to be repealed. They perform the same day-to-day tasks as civil servants, and all they want is for that to be recognized. The government has just announced an update of its defense policy, which focuses on recruitment and retention challenges in the armed forces. So the timing could not be better to finally support those who support the forces on a daily basis. Minister, it is time to repeal the 1982 Order in Council. Non-public funds workers deserve this respect, and the Bloc Québécois stands with them.
The honourable member from Bow River.
Oh,
Today, the
Pierre's looking locked in, man.
inflammatory budget that will be inflationary, that will punish working Canadians by increasing taxes and drive the cost of living even higher. Exemplary community leaders like Jackie Murray, who was a proud Canadian and knew the importance of being a responsible steward of the tax dollar, would write me consistently to axe the carbon tax, restore the Canadian principles, and defend our nation's interests. So today, the common sense Conservatives have three ideas that we need to do. Instead of hiking the carbon tax again, they should axe the carbon tax. That's right. So farmers and food can be done by passing Bill C-234 in its original form. Instead of announcing more failed programs, they should build homes, not bureaucracy. Get the shovels in the ground and get the structures in the air. Canadians had enough. Stop the hurt until the Conservatives can fix the Liberals' NDP costly calamity.
The honourable member for
We're about to start, folks.
Coast, Sea to Sky country.
If you haven't yet, now would be the time to hit that like button.
Natural beauty, unique Indigenous cultures, epic outdoor recreation, lively festivals, and delicious foods. Canada has what the world wants to experience. Tourism is the lifeblood of our nation. It's present in every town and city across our country. It contributes over $109 billion a year to Canada's economy, and it employs nearly 1 in 10 Canadians. It's powered by over 2 million tourism workers that expertly showcase and host visitors to our country's finest. These individuals are more than just employees. They're cultural ambassadors that unite us as a proud nation. I salute all those that make our tourism sector what it is, while we recommit as a country to work with you to make it even better. Happy National Tourism Week, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Here we go.
The common sense Conservatives will cut taxes, build homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. However, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. After 8 years, he spent huge sums of money with huge deficits and tax increases and thought that somebody else would pay. But he's not this millionaire Prime Minister or his friends who will pay. It's always the welders, single mothers, seniors who will have to deal with the increased cost of groceries and the doubling in the cost of housing. The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Mr. Speaker, what Canadians heard is a leader who doesn't have a vision, no ambition, and no plan. On this side of the House, we understand that Canadians understand that a country with ambition is a country that invests. It's a country that invests in more jobs, that invests in building more housing, that has more growth, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we will continue to focus, to fight for Canadians every day, while the Conservatives will invite a new slogan today, Mr. Speaker.
Hell yeah!
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Give us a new slogan.
His ambition is to replace his boss. And he's not the only one. He's not alone. He wants to fire this Prime Minister who is not worth the cost after 8 years. Results speak for themselves. He doubled the cost of housing, increased the cost of groceries, and now he's doubled the national debt. The results are poverty and exorbitant prices for Canadians. Why another $40 billion why will another $40 billion change the results?
Let's go, Pierre. Drop a W in the chat.
Minister of Innovation, Mr. Speaker, the only...
Let's see them W's fly.
On this side of the House is to work every day for Canadians, and that is exactly what we've done for the past 8 years. While the Conservative leader is inventing a new slogan every week, Canadians know full well that slogans don't build homes. Slogans don't build growth, Mr. Speaker. Slogans don't create jobs. They've been there for 8 years, Mr. Speaker. When's the last time that the Conservatives created a single job in this country? On this side of the House, we're going to fight every day for Canadians. We're going to present a responsible budget, and we will continue to ensure growth for this country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
common sense conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime after 8 years. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The results are in. He told us that if he massively increased debts and taxes, that someone else would pay for it. But of course, the Millionaire Trust Fund Prime Minister and his billionaire friends who invite him to private islands never pay a dime. It's always seniors, small businesses, and single mothers. Why would it be any different this time?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, in this budget, like all others, we will take into account the economic context as well as the needs of Canadians. That means for millennials and Gen Z as well, we will unlock supply in housing. We will ensure there are supports for renters. We will make sure there's a national school food program, and Mr. Speaker, and on this side of the House, we will make sure we do that while maintaining a strong fiscal position, AAA credit rating, and the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. Slogans don't make good policy, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, they've definitely proven that. Their slogan for the last 8 years is that you can double the debt and someone else will just pay the bill.
Yeah.
But we know who pays every single time. It is welders and
Canadians,
seniors, small businesses, and single mothers who have faced doubling housing costs and unaffordable food. And now their solution is to do more of the same, to pour on billions of dollars more of inflationary spending that will drive up interest rates, inflations, and taxes. Why would we expect it to be any different this time?
We got a AAA debt rating, man.
President of
the banks must love how much we owe.
On the contrary, our government has lifted 2.3 million Canadians out of poverty, and I would like
Yeah, and put 3.2 million of Canadians into poverty.
Canadians, why have they voted against the Canada dental benefit? Why have they voted against pharmacare? Why have they voted against $10 a day childcare, Mr. Speaker? That does not make sense because slogans do not make good policy.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Except everything she just listed are slogans on which they have not delivered. What they have delivered is they've doubled the debt, which has caused
That's pretty funny.
the worst inflation in 40 years, interest rates rising faster than at any time in history, the doubling of housing costs, the worst growth in the G7, the worst housing price inflation in that same group of nations. And today, after all of these devastatingly costly results, what do? The same thing that got us in this problem in the first place. Why won't they realize that they're the problem and not the solution?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has been masquerading across the country as a working class hero, but it's fascinating when you actually listen to what he thinks people do for a living. In a couple of recent speeches, he said he thinks
nice haircut.
electricity from the sky, and that welders weld with their...
Did the lawnmower fall on his head?
The fishermen in my community dive beneath the ocean and catch them with their bare teeth. Mr. Speaker, I can forgive the opposition leader for being a career politician who's been on the public dime for a couple of decades, but if he wants to represent the interests of the working class, he should talk to a person who has a real job.
So, all of these seals that are clapping just admitted that they don't have a real job. They're so dumb. The House Speaker just shushed grown-ass men and women.
Order.
Hello.
Order, please.
Oh my God. Drop an L in the chat. Drop an L in the chat. This is embarrassing for the Liberals and the Liberal House Speaker.
Order, please.
Shh. Shh. Everybody be quiet now. Just announce the next person. Let's get on with it.
For La Prairie. Quebecers have been cheated by this government since 2019 when it comes to housing. We represent 22% of the population. We got only 14% of the money, and only 6% of that was for affordable housing. Despite all this, the Minister of Housing is giving lessons out today. He told the press, La Presse, that his government is acting in good faith, in his opinion, and that it's the provinces that have to agree to do things differently. It's the federal government that has to do things differently. It must stop fleecing Quebecers. Will it pay our fair share of housing funds immediately instead of giving out lessons? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. The Bloc Québécois is not defining policies on housing in Quebec. We have a good relationship with our counterparts in Quebec to build housing. For example, we are making investments to build 8,000 affordable housing units. The overall programs, show that it's clear
these
that
guys spend billions of dollars on like 3 housing units.
Our work in building homes in Quebec and across the country. The Honourable Member for La Prairie, you have to do that, give lessons. It was this government that made the current housing crisis worse. It lost control of immigration and didn't pay Quebec its fair share for housing. That same government, incidentally, gave us ArriveCan. It can't print passports. It can't pay its own employees. With Phoenix, you can't make this stuff up. These gifted people are telling the provinces to act in good faith and do things differently. Does the government understand that the only thing that needs to be done differently is for these gifted people to mind their own business and stop trying to manage Quebec's housing money? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, we are Quebecers, and when we're talking about housing, they're saying, mind your own business.
From Wish.
When we stand up and we talk about ensuring that our kids are not going to school hungry, they say no. But when the Prime Minister of a foreign country comes here from another continent and he tells us, well, we have to listen to them. Well, Mr. Speaker, they'd be good to listen to them because Quebecers are standing up for Quebecers and Canada, and we will always do this. The Honourable Member for Rosemount Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, Canada's large corporations are highly profitable and among the least taxed in the world, a big gift from the Conservatives that the Liberals have maintained. In the U.S., President Biden has understood that it's unfair to workers, and he's going to make companies pay what they owe. Here, the Liberals are hesitating, treading water, beating around the bush, and we fear they won't have the courage to do the right thing. Mr. Speaker, I beg you, tell me, am I wrong? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, he is wrong. That's the simple answer, Mr. Speaker. There's some problems with memory, Mr. Speaker. We have an agreement with NDP colleagues. The Conservatives were opposed. We know that the best way to ensure stability in the country, to ensure affordability, is to have more competition. There's more choice with more competition. There's better prices, Mr. Speaker.
Two-tier healthcare. Competition. Let's go.
Of Canadians.
That's rich that the Liberal MP
Victoria
is saying competition is good.
Speaker, well, Canadians are struggling and food bank use is at an all-time high.
It's hypocritical.
Rich oil and gas CEOs are making record profits. Yep. Canadians are frustrated. But sources say that the finance minister backed out from an excess profits tax in this budget. Why? Because oil and gas lobbyists asked her to. Yeah. Just like the Conservatives, the Liberals keep caving to big oil and gas. Why do the Liberals keep protecting the profits of big oil and gas instead of everyday Canadians?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would point out Canada is the first and the only G20 country to have eliminated inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. We have introduced a tax on share buybacks across the economy to tackle exactly excess profits. Canada is putting into place the first and only in the world oil and gas emissions cap to hold the industry accountable for their own commitments. On the other hand, the Conservative leader has pledged to his oil and gas CEO donors to make pollution free again. We know who's in the pockets of oil and gas. It's that party over there.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
For 8 years of this this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, Canadians know that he's not worth the cost. Even proud Liberal and former bank governor David Dodge, who worked for Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien, says that this budget is on track to be the worst one since 1982. Wow. Canadians know that this budget will bring higher taxes, higher spending, meaning even more misery for families who can't afford to eat. Instead of drowning everyone, will they fix the budget, axe the tax on farmers and food, and stop the endless spending with the dollar-for-dollar law so that Canadians can afford to live?
Stop drowning us.
To the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if the honourable member is aware, but our fiscal markers are very strong. That is a AAA credit rating by an independent, objective observer. That is the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7, all the while we will continue to support vulnerable Canadians, something that they refuse to do on the other side of the House by voting against $10 a day childcare, families and seniors every single time. Mr. Speaker, the hypocrisy is palpable.
Yes. The honourable member from Thornhill.
Speaker, I'm not sure that the honourable member is aware of the pain that Canadians feel who can't afford to live in Canada. And what's worse is that they can't even afford to die. The Prime Minister's own news agency, the CBC, is reporting in provinces across Canada, dead bodies are being stored in mobile freezers because people can't afford the cost of laying their loved ones to rest. They can't afford their homes, they can't afford their groceries, they can't afford their gas, and now they can't afford a dignified goodbye. We're asking him just to stop. We know he won't. So how much inflationary fuel is the PM going to pour on the fire at 4 o'clock today?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, all Canadians deserve to die with dignity. They also deserve supports while they are alive, which is why we have reduced poverty by 22% on this side of the House, which is why we have supported families with $10 a day childcare and the Canada Child Benefit, which has lifted 500,000 children out of poverty. Mr. Speaker, what we will do on this side of the House is maintain a strong fiscal position while supporting Canadians, especially vulnerable Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We take that as our priority, unlike the other side of the House.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, we know that this Prime Minister and his NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost. His recent spending spree is inflationary and making everything worse, adding billions to the debt. This year alone, they will throw $52 billion towards debt servicing. That's more than they allocate to the provinces for health care. Doesn't the Prime Minister see his reckless spending is increasing inflation and debt, burdening all generations of already struggling Canadians? Or is he too busy cutting checks to care?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's delve into the numbers a little bit. When the leader of the Conservatives was Minister of Jobs, unemployment in Canada was 11% higher. Wages in this country were 75% of what they are now, and they had our foreign direct investment behind in Ireland, behind Japan, and now, Mr. Speaker, we are third in the world, and when you divide it by our population, we're first in the world on bringing good jobs, on bringing investments, on making Canada a place where everybody wants to call home, unlike the Conservatives, which are full of bluff and bluster.
Wow, top of his head's getting red.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Spendy ways, my friends, spendy ways. David Dodge said that this was likely to be the worst budget since 1982. 1982? Who was Prime Minister then? How out of control was that budget? How broke did Canada and Canadians become before Pierre Trudeau finally took his walk in the snow? Plus ça change, Mr.
The more things change.
2 million visits to food banks in a single month. Isn't it clear that Canadians are desperately hungry for change? How many more Canadians need to visit food banks before the Prime Minister really realizes that today's budget is a recipe for disaster?
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today sounds like a day for some of the greatest hits, so let's put the Conservatives in the spotlight. Mr. Speaker, when we formed government in 2015, one of the first things we did is we asked the wealthiest 1% of Canadians to pay more. How did the Conservatives vote? Against. When we asked to make sure that Canadians and their children could have money coming to their houses every month, how did the Conservatives vote? Against. And now that we're going to have a national national school food program and housing across this country and investments to grow this country, how are the Conservatives going to vote against?
Against the Liberals.
Order, please. I'm convinced that all members would like to hear the question by the honourable member for Charlebourg.
Just let them talk, bro.
Mr. Speaker, in order to bring inflation down and allow the Bank of Canada to lower interest rates, there aren't 36 solutions. You have to cap spending by applying the dollar for dollar rule. Want to spend $1? Save $1 somewhere else. It's simple. It's how everybody manages their budget at home. And that's how all government ministers should manage their departments. Is the Prime Minister going to cap spending to keep inflation and interest rates down in his budget that he's going to table shortly? The Honourable Minister of Public Services, Public Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives have always wanted to do and voted in favour is to reduce taxes for the wealthiest and make lives more difficult for everyone else, the middle class and those lower income earners. This includes a Canada Child Benefit. They voted against it in 2016. It was one of their first votes. It includes a vote against dental care for seniors, the 600,000 seniors who are now eligible for this plan. The leader of the Conservative Party, flees when we ask him when he's asked questions about this. The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party has 3 simple demands today. It's to build housing, not bureaucracy. The government insists on announcing inflationary measures that could cost Canadian taxpayers billions of dollars and only serves to increase inflation and the cost of living. Even David Dodge, the former Liberal governor of the Bank of Canada, has predicted that this will be the worst budget since 1982.
Holy
Will the
shit,
Prime Minister
man.
commit to following the demands of the Leader of the Official Opposition and build housing, not bureaucracy? The Honourable Minister of Public Procurement. My esteemed colleague is putting the Leader of the Opposition and housing together. He built 6 affordable housing units when he was Minister of Housing. So that's all he built during his mandate when he was the minister responsible for housing for the entire country. In my colleague's own riding, if I can say, there's only 12 affordable housing units that were built. So that's more than twice what the Conservative leader built. The honourable member.
Call an election, see who builds more.
English Montreal School Board has decided to challenge Bill 21 before the Supreme Court. That's fine, it's their right. But for the federal government to get directly involved in this case against the will of the National Assembly and provide money, our money, and lawyers, that's a no-no. The Quebec lieutenant says that Canada is secular, that the government supports secularism, but keeps telling us that we have to defend religious freedom against Bill 21. When will the Liberals understand that the best way to protect religion is for the state to have none at all? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I would repeat a fact that my colleague knows full well, is that we're working with this. The Bloc Québécois, when they want to talk about Quebec issues, we are Quebecers and they tell us to mind our own business. A foreign leader came here and then someone tells them what to do, and that person must be listened to. I must tell my colleague there are 35 Quebec MPs elected by Quebecers. We're proud Quebecers and will always stand up for Quebec.
Prioritizing Quebec over the rest of Canada?
Mr. Speaker, by supporting the will of the National Assembly, they can do good. By supporting the challenge to the law and the secular nature of the state, Ottawa is challenging our model of living together. In Quebec, we don't want religion and the state to intermingle. We've moved on. I'm sure that this isn't easy for our MPs who fight to ensure that the days of the House begin with a prayer, but Quebecers have chosen secularism. Religion is private, the state is public. I'd like the minister to answer frankly, why is his government opposed to secularism? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to be clear, it's a group of Quebecers who went to court to defend their rights under Quebec's Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They went to the Court of Appeal, and they've talked about it a few times for the past year. We'll be here to take part in the discussions. They're very important, and they are in relation to the Charter, the Canadian Charter and the Quebec Charter. The Honourable Member for Drummond, Mr. Speaker, this is a parliament where we hear God save the King for the head of the Anglican Church, in a parliament where elected representatives pray every day, not at home, which would be their strictest right. But here in this House, we have a government that wants to change the election date for Diwali, a religious holiday, and they're going to tell us that Canada supports secularism. That is so important. Honestly, will the minister admit that if he wants to challenge Bill 21, it's simply because he's against secularism? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, we are firmly committed to taking part in these important discussions that have huge repercussions for all Canadians. These are questions that concern the Canadian Charter and the Quebec Charter, as we have indicated on a number of occasions. We have serious concerns with regard to the preventive use of the notwithstanding clause of Section 33 of the Charter. So we need to ensure this. Thank you.
Member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. But let's hear from some rural residents. Judy from Arkona writes, the carbon tax is killing us. And Scott from Tupperville says, as a senior, I'm finding it hard to cope. And Walter from Elvinston writes, I have not even received a carbon rebate.
No, most people haven't.
Promised budget being set to be delivered at 4 p.m. today. Will the Prime Minister finally axe the tax on farmers, make food cheaper for Canadians, and pass Bill C-234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd really like to ask the Conservatives, they don't have to wait till 4 o'clock. They could pass the fall economic statement because, Mr. Speaker, that is having an impediment on what rural top-up is going. So in my riding, that would mean $1,430 to go every year to a family of 4. All across the country in Alberta, it would mean $2,160. I wish they'd pass the feds. Then they would truly be helping rural Canadians and rural families.
Here, here. The Honourable Member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Well, Mr. Speaker, even the polls tell us that the majority of Canadians are fed up with this Prime Minister overspending, over-promising, under-delivering, and failing this country. Over $52 billion will be spent on servicing his debt alone. And while Canadians are struggling, he raised the price of gas, groceries, and home heating of carbon tax by 23% just 2 weeks ago. This is punishment, not progress. So in his big deficit budget later today, will the Prime Minister finally axe the tax on farmers and make food cheaper for Canadians?
They're already anticipating deficit budget.
Minister for Rural Economic Development.
That's just sad.
I want to tell this story again. I told it a few weeks ago. It was a constituent in my riding who took the time to track every single amount of money that he'd paid. And you know what? He doubled it, in case he missed a few things. He was in $38 every time he got his check. I wish they do their homework, Mr. Speaker, because 8 out of 10 Canadians do get more with their Canada carbon rebate, especially in rural Canada.
The Honourable Member from Regina Leuven.
This coming from the Liberal member who said if Canadians want programs, they should vote Liberal. Come on, Mr. Speaker. For 8 long years, this Liberal NDP government is not worth the cost.
Let's go, Warren.
Canadians are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. And we all know that at 4 o'clock today, they're going to table a dumpster fire budget. This Prime Minister simply is not worth the cost. The question is, will he finally axe a tax on farmers so Canadians can put food on their tables?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we are focused on ensuring affordability for Canadians moving forward and addressing the climate issue. The price on pollution is an affordability mechanism. 8 out of 10 families get more money back. The PBO has underlined that. 300 economists across this country have underlined that. Mr. Speaker, every one of those MPs over there ran on the platform that included a price on pollution. This is the height of hypocrisy, and my My goodness, their plan is only to take money away from poor people and to let the planet burn.
That doesn't even make any sense.
Member from Regina, Leuven.
Climate can say whatever he wants, but they are 62nd out of 67 countries.
Oh, he's going to get in trouble for that.
The honourable member is an experienced member in this House and understands that we cannot refer to other members other than their titles that they have. Order.
It's kind of funny, this Climate Ken.
The honourable member to start from the top and to avoid such language.
He's not Ken. Ken's handsome.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. They see it time and time again when they...
Did you guys hear that? Somebody said he's not Ken. Ken is handsome.
Avoid such language.
He's not Ken. Ken's handsome.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. They see it time and time again when they go to the grocery store. And we know that our farmers are paying more. By 2030, when this...
Holy shit, that's funny.
...implemented at $170 a ton, farmers will be paying $1 billion in taxes. So my question was, again, on their 4 o'clock budget dumpster fire, will they axe the tax farmers so Canadians can put food on the table?
That was an open mic, yeah. A hot mic. I don't think he meant for us to pick that up.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if the honourable member is actually trying to insult me or actually give me a compliment. But I would say that it's important in this chamber that we actually use facts, that we are not misleading Canadians. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back. That is underlined by 300 economists in this country. And to be honest, it's underlined by the Premier of his province. When Scott Moe came here and actually testified, what he said is they looked at all alternatives and they were all too expensive. Well, that's absolutely the right thing, because we have put in place something that actually does address affordability, reduces carbon emissions on that side of the house. They don't believe in climate change, and they act...
Sit down, Climate Shrek.
Order. The honourable member from Hamilton Centre.
This past weekend, I met with over 100 youth from Hamilton who told me they don't even know how they're going to be able to pay rent, let alone ever be able to afford to buy a home in their lifetime. And a recent Spectator News report confirms that Hamilton's rent is out of control and quickly outpacing Canadian cities. And under the Liberals' watch, life has only gotten better for wealthy developers, and they're raking it in.
The honourable member from Hamilton Centre. Usually I can hear quite well. I'm having difficulty hearing him today. I'm going to ask all honourable members, in particular the member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies, to only take the microphone when he's take the floor when he's recognized by the Speaker. I'm going to ask the honourable, give the honourable member 20 seconds to finish his question. The honourable member.
Under the Liberals' watch, life has only gotten better for big money developers, and they're raking it in while the rents double for Canadians. So why are the Liberals refusing to take on corporate developers and failing to build non-market affordable housing now?
Where's his Palestinian scarf?
Order.
He didn't bring it today?
The honourable member, the honourable minister, rather, for housing, infrastructure and communities.
Mr. Speaker, I have great respect for the honourable member and thank him for his advocacy to build more homes in Hamilton, but he may not be aware that we recently invested $93.5 million in his city to help speed up the construction of up to 9,000 new homes. Mr. Speaker, in addition, we are putting money on the table that's going to help speed up the development. But if his concern is about building non-market housing, I'm pleased to point to the $1 billion we invested in the fall economic statement to build more affordable housing, the hundreds of millions we're using to build more cooperative housing, the $4 billion we're using to deal with the needs of urban, rural, and northern communities to serve Indigenous peoples. We're going to build housing for the most vulnerable. We're going to build housing for everyone.
I don't know who everyone is, because it's certainly not for
Speaker,
every person.
People in Winnipeg make up nearly 75% of the unhoused population. Almost 90% are sleeping outdoors or living in encampments. The Liberals' inadequate response is costing lives. And the Conservative leader, he cut 8,000 affordable units when he was the minister in charge. Clearly not a Conservative priority. In today's budget, will the Liberals commit to increasing funding for affordable housing with rent geared to income and get serious about ending homelessness?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her concern, and she's right to point out the desperate need of so many communities across country when it comes to building more affordable housing. She's right to point out the need for increased investment to support the needs of Indigenous people who remain unhoused. That's why we put more than $4 billion on the table to support the needs of Indigenous peoples in community, and an additional $4.3 billion to deal with the needs of Indigenous peoples who live in urban, rural, and northern environments. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, we've invested more than $120 million to build thousands of homes in her city. We're going to keep doing what we need to build more affordable housing. And one point of correction, it was 800,000 units that the opposition leader lost while he was housing minister.
Didn't you lose 1 million people?
Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, today the Deputy Prime Minister will deliver the budget. Over the last few weeks, we've seen the important efforts of this government to invest in this country, building a record we could be proud of. On the other side, Leader of the Opposition loves to talk about his record when he was Minister of Employment. He wants to convince Canadians that he has the solution to make life better. Cut, cut, cut. Well, cuts don't create jobs, cuts don't create investment, cuts don't increase wages. Can the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages tell the House what this government is going to do to make life better for Canadians?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Fleetwood, Port Kells, for his hard work. Since we took office in 2015, Mr. Speaker, wages are up, employment is up, and foreign direct investment is up. We are investing in Canadians, in the economy, creating great jobs and growth for the whole country. When the Leader of the Opposition was Minister of Employment, wages were lower, employment was lower, foreign investment was lower. While we're fighting for fairness for every generation, his record is clear, and there's one thing that'll be up if he ever takes over: cuts, cuts, and more cuts.
The Honourable Member from King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, it's clear this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. In Newfoundland and Labrador, there are 28 bodies in a freezer outside of a hospital because their families can't afford to bury them. This sounds like a Netflix horror movie, but sadly, it is the nightmare of this Prime Minister's
We're not supposed to have Netflix.
Conservatives demand him to stop the outrageous spending and make life affordable. Will they listen and give Canadians the ability to bury their loved ones?
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, we know it's a challenging time for many, many people. That's why we've been there all along, Mr. Speaker. We've been there with the child care benefit. We've been there with the increased OIS and GIS. We're now there with a dental program that's rolling out to help people. We know we have our carbon rebate this year for people. We know it's challenging times. We'll be there for Canadians, and we always will be, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from King Vaughan.
The old song is, "Stop in the name of Canadians." 28 bodies in a freezer because families can't afford to bury their loved ones. Houses have doubled. Food bank usage is higher in history. Well, you know. Families enough. Today, the Liberals are announcing their budget.
I love this.
Some compassion and ensure there's $1 of savings for every $1 of spending, so Canadians can afford to live.
Hey, she still got some lungs.
Before the Honourable Minister gets up, I'm going to encourage members, please. I hear some singing in the House. You know that singing is not permitted in the House. I'll just ask them to please.
Da, 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 da.
Very challenging and very upsetting time in their life. They know that this party on this side of the House is there to help them for many
What
reasons.
the
And
actual
we
F
believe in
does she have around her neck?
people, which we have been since the very, very beginning, and we will continue to, especially with today's budget later today. Thank you.
Looks like my headphones, my string headphones when I put them in my pocket.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Liberal government is not worth the cost. We've had 8 years of skyrocketing deficits and debt.
Deficits.
And this government has never controlled its spending. It's the perfect storm that generates inflation. And
people in the chat saying I'm not allowed to sing.
It's now cheaper for people to live in motels than in an apartment. At a bare minimum, during the budget later, will this government present a plan to control spending? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. 6, Mr. Speaker. 6 is the number of affordable housing units that the leader of the Conservative Party had built when he was Minister of Housing for the entire country during his entire term. Quebec municipalities are building 8,000 housing units with the help of the federal government. If you divide that by 6, it's about 1,200 times more. And yet, the leader of the Conservative Party is insulting Quebec municipalities. He's calling them incompetent. Who's really incompetent here? The Conservative leader with his 6 housing units, or Quebec municipalities with 8,000? The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, this member from Quebec seems to have fun with numbers these days. Well, I have a number for him, 750. ArriveCan cost $750 times more. And who was president of the Treasury Board at that time? The member across the way. And then after that, he was Minister of Health. And now he's Minister of Procurement. So it's a real hat trick of incompetence. Does he think it's insulting to have spent 750 times more when it was his responsibility to ensure that things were done right? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Insulting is indeed the key word here. Insulting Quebec municipalities by calling them incompetent. They are building 8,000 affordable housing units with the federal and Quebec governments. Meanwhile, the insulting leader of the Conservative Party only managed to build 6 housing units, affordable housing units, throughout his entire term, throughout the entire country.
Great, give him another shot.
In my colleague for Louis Saint Laurent's riding alone. The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe. Mr. Speaker, Ottawa is getting involved in a new border fiasco. On May 13th, importers may hit a wall at the border at customs. Why? Because there will be a new application at the border called CARM for paying import duties. Last week, 19 organizations raised concerns that neither the CPSA nor businesses will be ready on time. Will Ottawa delay the implementation of this application until the Committee on International Trade finishes its study of the matter and comes up with recommendations? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows very well, we always work with committees. We always collaborate with them, and I myself have met with the leader of the CPSA. We met yesterday on this matter. I have full confidence in the agency, which is fully aware of the circumstances surrounding this application, and I have full confidence that it will be handled correctly. The honourable member. Well, it's all very well to talk about full trust, but there's a precedent here for Ottawa's failures on big IT systems. We all know Phoenix. 8 years later, the federal government still can't pay its employees property. And there's another precedent with CBSA, ArriveCan. Wow, how reassuring. So coming back to this CARM system, the agency did not provide the documents requested by the committee. So the committee cannot finish up its study. And no one seems to know what to do if the application crashes on May 13th. Will Ottawa do what it has to do, which is delay the start date?
L'honorable ministre de la Sécurité publique.
The Honourable Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we have consulted and we will continue to consult exporters, importers. We understand their concerns. That is why I raised the question with the head of the CBSA, and I do not share the pessimism of my colleague from the Bloc. As my colleague, the Quebec Lieutenant, often says, they are experts on pessimism in the Bloc. I don't share that, and I think we will act correctly on this file.
Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, it's clear he isn't worth the cost or the corruption, like his $60 million ArriveCan contractor, who's being hauled before the House of Commons tomorrow for refusing to answer committee questions about his role in this Prime Minister's latest multi-million-dollar scandal. Now, this contractor claims that he only did Google searches and sent LinkedIn direct messages. So what did this guy and his partner give to these Liberals in exchange for the multi-million dollars that they were paid?
The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, just because my honourable friend continues to repeat something that he knows is not accurate doesn't make it so. He knows very well, Mr. Speaker, that there are a series of investigations that are being undertaken. The RCMP are seized with this matter. If the House, in its wisdom, decides to call people before the bar, that's entirely within the purview of the House. And, Mr. Speaker, we've also said from the beginning that anybody who abused taxpayers' money should face the consequences, and that's exactly what will happen.
The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The minister gets up and says that something's not true. Well, point to the lie is what I would say to him, because we know that 75% of the contractors listed on this app did no actual work. We know that two guys working out of a basement were paid tens of millions of dollars but did no actual work. And we know that every step of the way, these Liberals have tried to cover it up, like that minister and everyone on the front bench and the right to the back voted against having the Auditor General investigate. The question is very simple. These yo-yos working out of a basement were paid tens of millions of dollars, did no actual work. What did they give these Liberals in exchange for that sweetheart deal?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Again, Mr. Speaker, if our honourable friend wants me to point out the part of his question which he knows isn't accurate, it's the last sentence of the question.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. While speaking of this scandal, the ArriveCan scandal has reached unheard of levels in 100 years of Canadian history. Tomorrow, Christian Firth will appear at the bar of the House of Commons right here for protecting his friends within the Liberal government by refusing to give their names and lying. Just think about it. Two guys working out of a basement with no specialized IT knowledge. They got $20 million for developing a digital application, ArriveCan. I would ask the minister responsible for these historic levels of corruption, I would ask him to get up and apologize for this scandal, which made his Liberal friends rich on the backs of Canadians. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows very well that there is an investigation underway. The House is bringing in someone to appear on this matter. That is completely appropriate within the responsibilities of the House of Commons. We accept that. And from the beginning, whether with the Auditor General, whether with the RCMP, whether with parliamentary committees, we have always accepted an in-depth review of this situation. And anyone who has taken advantage of taxpayer funds will pay the appropriate consequence. The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Mr. Speaker, National Tourism Week celebrates a vital industry in Canada. It represents 1 out of 10 jobs and affects all regions. Like mine, Châteauguay-Lacolle, which will soon be called Châteauguay-les-Jardins and Napierville. Our government is making strategic investments, like the Indigenous Tourism Fund and the Tourism Growth Program. It's exactly the opposite of what the Conservatives would do. They always vote to cut these programs. Can the Minister of Tourism tell us about the importance of the tourism industry? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague for Châteauguay-Lacolle said so eloquently, this industry generated almost $100 billion in 2023 and employs 2 million people throughout the country. Beyond the numbers, tourism is something we can be proud of. We can be proud of sharing places with 2.5 million visitors from throughout the world. And that is why I am very surprised that the Conservative Party voted against giving a job to the bonhomme carnaval. That's why on this side of the House, we will all be wishing Canadians happy Tourism Week.
It's rare that I hear the honourable member's voice carry so far. I'm going to ask him, please, to make sure that he doesn't speak until he's recognised by the chair. The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Just when you think this NDP Liberal government couldn't be more out of touch, they go ahead and nominate the CBSA as unsung heroes for the Arrive scam, spending 60 million taxpayer dollars and demonstrating some of the worst financial record-keeping we've ever seen is the opposite of innovative and effective procurement practices. The CBSA should be an example of how not to do government procurement. Why on earth would this government reward incompetence?
Wow. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend knows very well that we have instituted a series of changes in terms of the procurement process, both at CBSA and horizontally across the Government of Canada. My colleague, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, has spoken about the changes we've made in light of the recommendations, of course, of the Auditor General. We welcome other reviews, whether it's parliamentary committees. And in the case of ArriveCan, Mr. Speaker, as you know, the RCMP are looking into this matter, and as I said, anybody who abused taxpayers' money will properly face the consequences.
Absolutely. The honourable member from...
So, like the entire Liberal cabinet?
The costly NDP Liberal coalition have announced another poorly conceived federal idea. Their dental care debacle is failing Canadians. I have one simple question. How many dentists in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI have signed up for the dental care debacle?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, it's great news, Mr. Speaker, because unlike the member opposite, we're working with dental providers and we're opening up a new portal, which means that in order to participate, all they have to do is accept that dental card and provide service. And the dentists that I'm talking to, as we work through these issues in the negotiation, are extremely excited to do what the member is not, which is to make sure that every Canadian from coast to coast to coast gets oral health care. And that means 1.8 million seniors and soon 9 million Canadians who will have the oral health care that they need.
I ask the honourable member from Oxford, please, to allow his colleague to ask a question and allow the minister to answer. The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
Well, interesting enough, the Minister of Health of the NDP Liberal government has been singing the praises and photo ops of this program for months now. Their plan is lacking and it's failing Canadians. One simple question once again to the minister. How many dentists in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI have signed up for the botched care announcement? I'll actually give him the answer. It's 8 out of 1,107.
Wow. There you go. Let's see how they get out of this one.
Order. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite knows that we're opening a new portal and that members don't have to sign up, that all that needs to happen is they bring their card and they participate in the program. But here's the truth, Mr. Speaker.
I'll ask honourable members to please restrain themselves. I know it's budget day. It's a big day. The honourable minister has 20 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that they don't want that 9 million Canadians who don't have dental care to get service. They don't want or believe that Canadians who don't have access to diabetes medication to get it. They don't want, Mr. Speaker, for women to be able to get access to universal contraception. So they push despair because they don't want people to hope for something better. Well, we're there to deliver something better.
The honourable member for Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, climate change is real. The science is clear.
Current drought conditions and above-average temperatures are bringing an increasing risk of wildfires. Last year, more than 230,000 Canadians were forced out of their homes, not knowing what the future looks. Now, next to 100 fires are already burning in British Columbia, and communities are rightfully concerned. Can the Minister of Emergency Preparedness tell us what our federal government has been doing to...
Informally, I did ask the honourable member from Missinamaskee Fraser Valley, please, to allow the member from Richmond Hill to ask his question. I'm going to give the honourable member from Richmond Hill 15 seconds to finish his question. The honourable member.
Last year, more than 230,000 Canadians were forced out of their home not knowing what the future holds. Now, next to 100 fires are already burning in British Columbia, and communities are rightfully concerned. Can the Minister of Emergency Preparedness tell us what our government has been doing to make sure we will be there for British Columbians this summer?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from Richmond Centre for this very important and timely question. Last year we had the worst wildfire season in Canadian history because of climate change, and potentially this season could be even worse.
It's a freaking robot, man.
Very closely with the province and territories and Indigenous leaders to provide the resources that they need. We are training more firefighters, providing additional firefighting equipment, and adding more initiatives to provide humanitarian support. On this side of the House, we know the devastating impact that climate change is having on Canadians, and we will be there for them. Thank you.
Good job. The honourable member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Seniors are being kicked out of their homes because assisted living is now fodder for greedy developers and private equity firms. 90-year-olds are being put on the streets so that super rich CEOs can make a buck. Yep. The Liberals and the Conservatives let developers buy up affordable housing, and now they're letting them go after long-term care. A family whose father was kicked out of his home called this a death sentence. Will the government stop this in its tracks and use the budget to end greedy CEOs from evicting vulnerable seniors?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, as we move down a path of increasing investments to build more affordable housing, we have to acknowledge the very real challenge that exists when affordable housing that is already in communities is snapped up to be for the purpose of renovating those who live in it. That's why we're moving forward with a Canadian First, a new acquisition fund that's going to help nonprofits buy up existing low-cost rentals so they can keep them affordable in perpetuity. This is a new direction that's going to help many thousands of Canadians not just find a place to call home, but to keep a place to call home that they can actually afford.
Honourable member from North Island Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, in the past 2 years, there's been a 50% increase in denied claims for veterans seeking disability benefits. This is shameful. They served our country, risking their lives and safety in the process, yet the Liberals keep turning their backs on them, just like the Conservatives did for years before. This is an issue of respect and livelihood. Many veterans are struggling and they rely on these benefits to make ends meet. Do the Liberals plan on fixing this, or will they keep denying veterans their dignity?
Here, here. The Honourable Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take a moment to thank my colleague for important work on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Mr. Speaker, our government has always been there for veterans and will continue to be there. Since 2015, we've invested more than $11 billion in additional funding to support veterans and their families. We've also, in contrast to the Conservative Party of Canada, when they closed the Veterans Affairs Office on this side of the House, we opened them immediately because we recognize that they provided direct services to victims, to veterans. Mr. Speaker, we will always be there to help support our veterans in their time of need and their family. Thank you.
And as such, it comes to an end of question period. But I would like to bring to the attention of honourable members, it's a great privilege for me to draw to the attention of honourable members.
Nope. We are not taking a look at who is in the gallery. That's where we're going to end this live stream, folks. I do want to remind everybody that I will be going live again in about 40 minutes on my other channel, Mr. Sunshine Live. As you can see, it is queued up to go live in 43 minutes. I will put the link down in the live stream description. It also is pinned. I look forward to seeing you guys there. That's going to be for the budget announcement. As for live streams here on or for House of Canada, I will see you guys at the same time tomorrow for Caucus Leader Day. Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre should be going toe-to-toe. So see you guys hopefully on Mr. Sunshine Live for the budget announcement. And if not, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace and love, everybody. Take care.